The Gamilaroi people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. I'd also like to pay respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people present this evening. And if we could rise please for the opening prayer. Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to vouchsafe Thy blessing upon this council, direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of Thy glory and the true welfare of the people of the Regional Council and Australia. Amen.
Amen.
So, councillors, I'd like to officially open the meeting, and the first item on our agenda is apologies and leave of absence. As we are all in attendance, we're happy to take a motion to receive. Move Councillor Betts and Councillor Wilson. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 2, community consultation. We have one member of the community to make representations to the council this evening. That community member is Mr Peter Gill to make representation on item 8.4, and Chris will read out his representation letter. Thank you.
Okay, submission from Peter Gill on item 8.4 to the Mayor, Councillors and staff. Mr Gill wishes to speak in support of item 8.4. Thank you to the staff in preparing this report. It contains good detail. I am generally in agreement with the TRC approach. I have not been able to access the business paper annexures and such. I apologise if I is short on detail. In particular, I wish to address a point on the available water determination and associated service standards for New South Wales dams. In relation to the available water determination, the detail presented is the most comprehensive I have seen on this matter. In terms of calculation, it has to be to date being based on 100% for the next current year with 75% applied for the following year. This does not fit with the typical 5 to 6 year spill cycle experienced on Chaffey Dam and the water security needs of Tamworth, Mooby, Cotingle. My belief is that the AWD needs to be based on the typical spill cycle, i.e. something on a 5 to 6 year basis. This will require an appropriately sized compartment of water, perhaps 35 to 40 gigalitres devoted to Tamworth. To give effect, a revised algorithm would be needed. A lesser 2-year basis may be satisfactory for general security allocations. In the current 2-year calculation, there is no provision for the 3rd year and following. The issue of the use of the lowest recorded inflows based on the latest available records is a must. I can only surmise this is not adopted due to pressure applied to Minister by those who stand to lose by application of lowest on record. Alternatively, the TRC drought management plan may need adjustment to align with revised operational aspects of the water sharing plan. It is of note the following previous practice of ceasing general security releases at 40% of the smaller Chaffey after augmentation of Chaffey. There was the assumption that an additional 10 gigalitres from the total 40 gigalitre upgrade was available to Tamworth, and same for same would apply at 40% of augmented capacity. To invoke my proposal would require holding an additional compartment volume in the dam. The implementation of this would require a one-off saving from releases to commence. After that, there would be no effect to other users. As there is currently no general security allocation, it is easily implemented at this point in time. Point 2 is the service standard for dams. This is a protocol/guide used for sizing dams for town supplies. Whilst ostensibly applies to construction, and it being a practice guide, only the fundamental point is that it sets an operating principle. For the upgrade of Chaffey, circa 2012, it was defined as 5-10-10. The latest information I am able to search, circa 2013, has amended this to 5-10-20, meaning drought restrictions at 5% of the time in 10 years, 20% effect, equal to level 3 to level 4 restrictions, or a 20% reduction in use. I.e. once every 10 years we are in level 3, level 4 water restrictions for 18 days. There are 2 things arising, namely the allocation of the water, SWD, should be arguably by inference considered this service standard. New South Wales guidelines on assuring future urban water security to New South Wales Office of Water, December 2013, and that arguably on the same basis as the referenced wish of the Minister to retain the basis of the 2010 version of the water sharing plan that TRC negotiate based on using 5-10-10. Time does not permit a much wider discussion, and this meeting not being one that has community forum, I have had to present this in community consultation mode. However, if so desired, I would be happy to elaborate further on my views if council should so desire. Thank you, Mr. Peter Gill.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, before you proceed, I've just received an email from Mr. Gill saying that the live stream's not working.
I just updated
Can somebody
it.
check?
I just updated it.
You just, okay, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. That is the only representation we have from community this evening, so we'll move on to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Move Councillor Inglis and Councillor Webb, thank you. Any matters arising from those minutes? Councillor Inglis?
Mr Mayor, just to point out, if it hasn't been corrected, but certainly on the copy I looked at recently, on page 1 of the minute, Roman numeral 1, there was a number missing, 222.
Thank you. So, councillors, if we have no other matters from those minutes, I'll put that motion. Those in favour, and that motion with the adjustment. Those in favour, those against, the motion is carried. Item 4, disclosures of interest. Any councillors have any disclosures they wish to register this evening? If not, we'll move through. Item 5, there is no mayoral minute. Item 6, there is no notice of motions. That brings us to item 8.1. We have a mover, Councillor Inglis, and a seconder, Councillor Wilson. Thank you. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of quick observations. It's a great plan, a lot of work's gone into it. I thank the staff and the consultant. The consultant's done a very thorough job. Anyone who's even remotely interested in sport and recreation, there's some fantastic stats and database there. What I also love about it is, Mr Mayor, that we're already seeing Blueprint have its influence on our strategic planning. I like the idea of those population trigger points at every 10,000k population growth. Makes a lot of sense. Also like the fact that it includes public and private. So we're looking at it holistically, which is sensible because private marketplace does provide, particularly in the recreation and also the sport. And Mr Mayor, the other great contribution that it makes, that it isn't just about sport and recreation in a sort of purist way. It is about social benefits, it is about economic benefits, and it is about public health benefits. And I know the Deputy Mayor also loves the fact that it builds social capital, Mr Deputy Mayor. So a great plan, and congratulations to it.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Eby?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I do agree, it's a fine document, a lot of information, very detailed, and it represents the entire local government area very nicely. I must admit though, I'm a little disappointed that there wasn't the opportunity for the category of the elements up at the Oxley Reserve Precinct, or known as Victoria Park Precinct, that the category wasn't increased from a regional to a state or a national or even an international. As we know, when people come to Tamworth, one of the first things they do is they go to the Oxley Lookout, and it's listed in the document as a regional venue only. And I fear that if and when we look towards securing funding to continually upgrade the whole precinct, including updates to strategic plans, of which there was an original plan in 2012, and I believe there will be some updates to that plan in due course. That if it was seen as which it is, a national or even an international area, it might just improve the chances of being able to secure some of that funding in the future. But apart from that, I like to be positive with these things. I think it is a very, very fine report, and I also do thank the staff for preparing it.
Thank you. Any further comment? Councillor Wilson?
Mr Mayor, I too think it's a great report. It's comprehensive, and as it was said, it encompasses the whole area that sport contributes. It was highlighted by some areas of the community, and I agree with it that unstructured activities and unstructured sport is becoming more and more important and sought by locals and tourists, such as walking, trail bike riding, riverbank activities and activities associated around areas that we identify as Flagstaff. And into the future, I think that's one area we're going to have to spend more money and look more at, is those freer, more outdoor and unstructured activities. But no doubt that'll be factored in as we go.
Thank you. Councillor Betts.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Hello, councillors. Have echoed my comments. The fact that it's an excellent report, it really is. There's been a lot of work put into it. I had the privilege of going to the community consultation meetings at a number of the venues, and it was very well handled. And all the issues that were addressed by the community groups have been addressed in the changes to the document, which is great to see. And as I said, the community, when we went out there to those consultation programs, they were really enthusiastic about the input, that they're putting genuine input into it. I do agree with Councillor Impey. I think that Victoria Park precinct is far more than the regional precinct, because as Councillor Impey said, we get tourists come from out of the Tamworth area, and it's not only just within the region, it's not just outside the region, not only outside the state, it's national and international, and it's something that I think we really should work on, because I think when we're moving out of this COVID crisis, as we're moving out of it, to have a tourist attraction such as that, I think we need to capitalise on it. I think we need to probably revisit the regional status. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further discussion, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Motion is carried. Item 8.2.
Move it.
Move Councillor Webb and Councillor Impey, thank you. Councillor Webb, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, it's pretty straightforward, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried. Item 8.3. Move Councillor Rodder and Councillor Maxwell, thank you. Councillor Rodder, do you wish to speak to 8.3?
Just quickly, Mr. Mayor. Only that it's regrettable that we had to cancel the 2020 Regional Sports Awards, but for the reasons detailed in the report, it was necessary to do so. But I'm sure and hope that in 2021 we'll be back and with a bigger and better awards night.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? Not. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 8.4. Move Councillor Webb and Councillor Wilson. Councillor Webb, do you wish to speak to your motion?
I will, Mr. Mayor. Good report too, I'd like to say to the Director. It spells it out fairly loudly and clearly, a lot of the details that we need to give consideration to. Mr. Mayor, if I can just take us back a little bit down memory lane. In around 1976, the first Chaffey Dam was being discussed and decided upon, and there was a lot of work being done, and the Mayor of the day then, I think it might have been Warwick Bennett, was involved in the signing of many of the papers involved in that. And when those discussions were being had and when the work was being done on that leading up to the construction of that dam, and then following that, there was talk about the dam being at 62 gigs, and that would service our population for a certain amount of time. Back in 76, the population of Tamworth was about 29,000, or a little bit over 29,000 people. So there was consideration that the dam was being built so that the city didn't have so many water restrictions, and we had a more secure supply of water. That was why they built the first stage of Chaffey Dam. Along the way, there was obviously water there for some irrigators, water for stock and domestic and other things. Mr. Mayor, back in those days when they did this initial discussions, there was talk about the dam having a second stage, and that second stage would take the dam to about 100 gigs, and we're fortunate enough to see that now. But the discussions held back then, and they're documented, talked about that 100 gigs should be to service the city of Tamworth, and understanding that back then it was the city of Tamworth. The city of Tamworth grow to a 60,000 population, and that should be sufficient water for us as a city to grow to that population. Back then, of course, they didn't consider that Moombi Katingal would be attached to the supply lines, and probably the city of Tamworth, as it has now grown and expanded, there are areas that weren't considered back then with that 60,000 population. Mr Mayor, moving forward, 60,000 people. So with that 100 gigs, they were expecting that we would probably need about 20 gigs of water annually to supply a good supply of water to the city, which is not what they're talking about now. Moving forward to 2010, Mr Mayor, there was a move to put, and it was a fairly rushed thing too. There was a Labor government in power at the time, and they put the water sharing plan, the Peel Valley water sharing plan in place. Now the water sharing plan was put together, as I say, a bit rushed, and of course it was for 10 years, and it was for 10 years for two reasons. One of those reasons was to give some security to the businesses and the users of the water, that if they had to go and borrow money to do any infrastructure building or what have you, that there would be some guarantees there if they went to the bank. They knew they had a period of time with some secure water, that's if it rained, of course. The other thing was, Mr Mayor, that, and this was stipulated quite strongly back in 2010 when that water sharing plan was put together, and that was that the first 10 years would be 10 years whereby the plan that they'd put together and was going to be in use could be carefully considered over the 10 years of usage, and that at the end of that 10 years or during that 10 years, any of the shortcomings, any of the issues that were raised in that 10 years which were causing issues for the water users in general, namely the Tamworth City Council, or well, it was the Tamworth Regional Council then, namely the Tamworth Regional Council being the biggest water user. And of course the businesses that hang off Tamworth Regional Council being the abattoirs as the biggest water users within the city. So the plan was developed with that in mind, that we should be able to identify any of the shortcomings and that those shortcomings would be addressed before the second plan was put into place. Now, Mr Mayor, we look at the report that's before us tonight and we see that it's quite clear that any of those shortcomings that we've come up with and other water users have come up with, but namely us, have not been addressed, and it appears from the report and from what I can understand that the draft water sharing plan that's going to be put forward will probably very much mirror the water sharing plan that was put up in 2010. So the opportunity has been lost by some, and I would say whoever's put this together and the bureaucrats have probably don't understand what the discussions were in 2010 when this plan was first put together, that all of those shortcomings, there was a time, which is now or just before now, to address those shortcomings and fix this plan as they take it forward. But it's my understanding that the shortcomings have not been addressed, and we have a draft plan in front of us that will take us forward for the next 10 years, and nothing is going to be fixed. And of course, we've got businesses in this city, Mr Mayor, we've got some big businesses in this city that use a lot of water, and they're looking at growth into the future. They're looking at what our water supply is going to look like, what our security of water is going to look like into the future. There are other businesses that are eyeing off this city because Tamworth is seen as a place to come to and grow your business and build your business. They're looking at our water supply and they're starting to show some signs of concern because of what they're seeing in this inaction in terms of developing a better water sharing plan. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to comment? Councillor Rudder?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If anything demonstrates how insignificant our Tamworth City, Katingal and Moombi communities are to the New South Wales Government, I believe it's this issue of water management, with untold negative impacts on our residents, businesses and industries. Being a safe and faithful electorate to the government of the day has delivered no reward, otherwise we'd have some water security and confidence in water management. no changes to the Peel Valley Water Sharing Plan, no changes to state instruments of water management, no inclusion of the drought of record into calculations about how much water is subsequently withheld for community use in dry times, no flexibility in so-called environmental flows, no explanation about their water releases during 2 years of prolonged drought, where in accordance with our drought management plan, restriction levels changed from level 2 to 5 in record time. A government that denies rural New South Wales communities the assurances and confidence they need to emerge from drought, fires and COVID-19 as well as they possibly can. No transparency or accountability of water management. No water register of licences and allocations that would show the people of our state who the beneficiaries of our precious water resources are. And as seen in the report, when a staff asked about fractured rock water in the Peel, they were told it is 100% allocated. And I wondered, to who? If the Dungowan Dam proposal is progressed, there is no guarantee of water security for our communities. What the government would guarantee is full cost recovery in some of the most expensive water charges in our state. The current Dungowan Dam and assets would likely be appropriated by the state government and no compensation given for the dam infrastructure or of adjoining land purchased by council on behalf of our ratepayers. The comment by the Water Minister that a new Dungowan Dam would secure our longer-term water security is simply empty rhetoric. The maddening feature of this issue is that I can still remember the 2007 drought and the frustration of our community representatives talking to the Labor Water Minister of the time and seeing no satisfactory outcome, as we still see no satisfactory outcomes with recent discussions with national water ministers. That was about 5 water ministers ago. We have no control over the pipeline from Chaffey Dam. Imagine the putrid water that will be expelled from it each time it is operated, and in the future we'll have no control over the Dungowan Dam pipeline either, if that proposal is progressed. The taxpayers of New South Wales should be appalled at the waste of funds on a pipeline they only intend to use when the dam falls below 20%. An honest report, and I fully support it, as I do our TRC communities.
Thank you. Councillor Betts.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Excellent report, as my fellow councillors have indicated. The 20% when the pipeline gets shut off, to me is something that we really need to try and continue to fight, because I understand the reason why they're doing it, so that the water, once the dam gets up to 25%, the water for the Tamworth supply will be delivered by the river, which will keep the river wet. And that'll allow the 3 megalitres of environmental flow to come down and go right down through the system as needed. But one of the things that really irks me in this plan, and I think it's incompetence that's actually part of it, is the current drought. The worst drought on record hasn't even been considered in this. And we saw the 51% of the groundwater extraction that was directly linked to intrinsically linked to the river. Without taking that into account, for this water sharing plan is a travesty of justice for the community of our region. From all water users, and as Councillor Webb said, businesses want to come and invest in this area, and businesses mean jobs. And I tell you what, coming out of this COVID crisis, we need jobs. And with a water sharing plan that doesn't take into account the worst drought on record, needs to be looked at. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Further discussion, councillors? Councillor Impey?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'll echo and agree with what's been said by my fellow councillors. The New South Wales government talk about wanting to see the regions prosper and see the regional cities grow into larger centres in similar ways to what's happened in Victoria and northern parts of Queensland and of course Toowoomba, where communities have grown. But we won't grow if we don't have a secure water supply. And as we've discovered over the last 3 or 4 years, partly due to drought, but also partly due to the mismanagement of water, we have come very close to being quite dry and running out of water and not having enough to see the city maintain itself rather than grow. There are people all across our community who have survived on level 5 water restrictions, lost gardens, lost lawns, lost what they love to look after. And I can only think that if the same situation was to happen in Sydney, where water was mismanaged to the extent it has been in our part of the world, there would be 5.5 million people making sure that the government wasn't re-elected. Why are our 60,000 people who live in Tamworth, Moonbi, Cotingal less important than 5.5 million people living in Sydney, I wonder? I think there's a real mess and somebody needs to fix it. I think the staff who are very, very, very capable and talented of Tamworth Regional Council know how to fix it, but it doesn't seem we have a state government who are wanting to work with us to try and fix the situation. I hope it is fixed. I hope it's not just Mother Nature with the prospects of rains, good rains in spring that does fix it and therefore hides the situation for next time. It needs to be fixed now. Now is a whole lot better than never. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Mr Mayor, it's an excellent report. It's so well structured and so easy to follow the progress of what's happened, but more particularly what hasn't happened. And the state needs regional areas, the state needs the country, and this is virtually leg roping us. And my genuine concern is if the water sharing plan with this absolute lack of detail and it takes away all opportunity for planning for a city and for businesses, and it really concerns me. The other thing is if regional Australia can't grow with confidence, then the whole state suffers, and we're certainly suffering. And the lack of use once the dam goes above 20% is a real worry. And maybe from the things I've been doing this week and over the last few months in terms of the university, I thought, seriously, if this water sharing plan was a first or second university, in response to a first or second year university assignment, it would probably elicit comments like this, and I puddled through. A lack of detail, data outdated and poor selection. Point 3, inconsistent application. 4, difficult to term and sort outcomes. 5, lacks explanation and logic. No action, not dealt with issues, and probably the most obvious is it's incomplete. And that's the best description I could give to the water sharing plan that we've got to develop and move forward with. And my absolute concern is that with the new dam built, we're going to lose even more control of our water and be in a worse situation. And probably worse than that, there appears now no opportunity, no passageway for us to have it dealt with reasonably and rationally, fairly and honestly. And where do we go from here? Because the staff has done an amazing job in making every possible application and presentation possible to every appropriate person. And we still end up with a water sharing plan that says no detail, no detail, no detail, no detail, and all the way through on every issue, there's no detail. I'd be embarrassed to present something like this.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors? Yes, Councillor Inglis.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I won't repeat anything that's been said. I'll just have a quick look here over and above that. The available water determinations, and this report actually just sort of highlights and sticks it in front of you in the context of, I think it actually provides some very insightful insights into the core problem here, and that's the policy framework and the decision-making frameworks. They are so flexible, and no pun intended, so liquid. It's an attempt to provide the illusion of meeting the needs of all stakeholders. There was great uncertainty, particularly with the Murray-Darling Basin. They've made it so flexible that in a way that they wanted to cater for all the various interest groups and all the various stakeholder groups to create that sort of, as I say, illusion of meeting the needs of all stakeholders. Mr Mayor, one thing I think is important, I would like to acknowledge some of Mr Gill's comments. He made some very good points in that letter. But I do believe very strongly that we should not give up on that request for the Scotts Road drift wells to be classified under that Water Supply Critical Needs Act. That's just a joke. It shouldn't be an argument about the principle. The only argument should be about the trigger point for that. And if we just can't even get them to agree to use at least 2 of those drift wells when, say, Chaffey gets to 15%, because we know we can draw up to about 5 megalitres a day, knowing we need on level 5 about 15. If we can't even get that over the line, to get that classified under that Critical Needs Act at an agreed trigger point, well, if we can't do that, forget the other stuff, Mr Mayor, because that should be easy.
Thank you. Councillor Tickle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I fully support the motion and the Director's report. It's clear that water management in the Peel Valley is a mess. And in fact, water management in Australia, federally, by government, and in the state is a mess. And this is due in part to too many conflicting interests that have to be met by foreign ownership, by wealthy individuals who have nothing to do with producing food or anything else, but everything to do with on selling the water to people that are desperate for it to produce food and fibre for our population. That is only one of the many problems, but as has been said, there are many conflicting interests, there are many hidden agendas, we're never told what they are. It doesn't seem to be that any successive governments can't fix this problem. Meanwhile, here in our region, and in fact in many other regions within Australia, in New South Wales, people are desperate for water, for their share of water. Where is the water going? We need these answers, and successive governments cannot provide them. It's time that the governments listen to the people. I doubt that they will. We've been having this same debate for years and years and years. And only 4 years ago, Chaffey Dam was full, 100 gigalitres. Prior to that, we only had a 42 gigalitre dam. No, 62 gigalitre. Sorry, getting my gigalitres mixed up here. Had 62 gigalitres before. We had a 60% increase on what water was there before. Our population hasn't doubled in that time. Our industry hasn't doubled. Our farming community hasn't doubled or trebled. Where is the water? Sure, we've had a drought, but there are a lot of questions unanswered out there. The people in this community, our residents, our businesses, and I include agriculture, a very important business in our community, need to be treated better to this. Government needs to listen to us. We should never have reached the point we had. 100 gigalitres was plenty of water. We were told when that was augmented, only a little over 4 years ago was it completed. There was enough water there for 30 years. 30 years. Where is it? Now we're told that this little puddle of the Dungowan Dam, a fraction of the size of Chaffey, is going to be 20 years. We're going to secure our water for 20 years at $500 million. I just think that it is time that the minister listen to us, but we're falling on deaf ears. They can't do anything. It's all controlled, and we know there are hidden agendas with water, and it's a very sad state because unfortunately our citizens are being treated as second class. We seem to come last in all of this, to the point that we could potentially run out of water, and that is not good enough. It's time our elected officials did better and stood up to the vested interests that there are in water. And so I give my full support to the Director to do all he can and continue to do it, and I only wish that the government would listen to him and also listen to our community.
Thank you. Councillor Webb, do you wish to exercise your role?
Close the debate, Mr Mayor. Yeah, just only in saying one little thing, and that is on paragraph 4 in the report, councillors. Mr Mayor, it talks about the fractured rock allocation has been 100% taken up. I believe it's about 98% taken up. But I think if we look at what's actually happened, there was an allowance of 70,000 LTU for the Peel Valley, LTU being long-term water use or long-term water use or extraction. Now, that was reduced to 15,000 litres just not so long back, but I don't recall any consultation, and I don't believe our staff know about that consultation process. And I don't think that should have happened without a consultation process being put in place and those discussions being held with all of the users in the Peel Valley. So that's actually what's happened there, and that's why we're now finding that we can't get licences for fractured rock, and I think that in itself is quite a disappointment. But I will close the debate on that, Mr Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, I'd now like to put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The motion is carried. And that brings us to item 8.5. Move Councillor Betts and Councillor Inglis, thank you. Councillor Betts, do you wish to speak to your motion? Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 8.6. Move Councillor Wilson and Councillor Tickle, thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Once again, Mr Mayor, it's an excellent report. I must admit all the reports that come out of the this directorate are excellent and comprehensive. Just a couple of comments. The response by business is commendable in terms of working hard to reduce their water use and to be efficient. I wonder whether it's worth us having a conversation with people involved in the industry and perhaps coming into summer, look at ways of promoting efficient users, coolers, rather than evaporative coolers, but look maybe as a team effort looking at promoting efficient methods of cooling that don't involve so much water. And I'd like to make comment, if I might, just pulling on last meeting. AMRs are another way that businesses could have used the data from to become even more efficient. That's denied them right now, no doubt that will happen down the track. But however, a good report with worthwhile information. Thank you.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against the motion? Any councillors wish to make comment? If Councillor Tickle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Another excellent report, and residents, both business and the wider community have been very responsible in their management of water, and we do continue to thank them for that. Messaging that's going out from council is also very clear, and people have taken various measures on board. In fact, some of them have been quite innovative in the way that people are recycling water and saving water. It is also very encouraging to see the uptake of grey water within the community, even though there are no rebates mentioned here. There are a number of people that have been put in systems and reusing grey water. And also the number of tank installations has increased. It's a regular occurrence to see a tank on the back of a truck heading out somewhere, and so it's fantastic that the community have embraced all these ideas, and of course then if they've got a tank they can have water, well, when it rains that is, and but at least it all helps to help them have more water all year round, and particularly with grey water. And it is something we need more education on, is grey water, because we have that all year for gardens. So we are continuing to do that, and I'm sure that we'll see even a bigger uptake as understanding of those systems increases.
Thank you. Councillors, just before I put this motion, I would like to publicly acknowledge the contributions made to our Tamworth Regional Water Supply Task Force, which we resolved at our meeting last Wednesday to disband if the dam reached 25%, and it will be reconvened if the dam gets back to 15%. But we had a great contribution by agency leaders from health, education, police and emergency services, from agriculture and a number of our larger water users, those businesses in the city that are very large employers and also large water users. And it was a really productive process, and I'd really like to have it on the record that on behalf of the community, thanks to all of those members for giving up their time and contributing to us not running out of water. So we were somewhat successful, I think, in creating some new opportunities, new initiatives, and we had some very good advice from those community members. So in saying, councillors, I'd now like to put the motion. Those in favour, those against, motion is carried. And that brings us to item 9.1. Councillor Inglis, seconded Councillor Maxwell. Thank you. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Just an observation, Mr Mayor, the old policy review, it doesn't get any better than that, does it? But I must compliment the staff. If they really wanted me to straighten up in my chair and put my glasses on and concentrate, that section from 18.1 to 19.1, I even went online and Googled PhD in Policy Amendment Surveillance Protocols. The old 18.4 is now 18.2. You go to 18.2, that policy's been removed and included, Mr Mayor. It's all good. That. Well done, staff.
Thank you. Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against, the motion is carried. And item 9.2. Move Councillor Wilson and Councillor Betts. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, Mr Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Inglis.
Mr Mayor, I couldn't help but notice in the attachments for the write-offs, TRC, write-off, $2.38. Reason? Uneconomical to recover. Mr General Manager, I thought we were doing a bit better than that.
I'm not surprised to see that.
On a more serious note, conservation agreements with rates, that's a growing matter in local government across all of New South Wales. A lot more of these biodiversity offsets, and I know there's a whole range of councils looking at getting LG New South Wales through IPART to have a look at that whole issue of conservation agreements. I see we've got a few, not massive dollars, but I think it was about $9,000 or something. But that's a big issue. As I say, more and more of these offsets that you can do now, which means you'll have a conservation agreement, which means you'll be exempt for rates. So it's a one creeping up on the industry, that one, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any further comment, councillors? Nobody wish to speak against? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 9.3.
Move it.
Councillor Webb and Councillor Maxwell, thank you. Councillor Webb, do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, Mr Mayor, I just think it's very important that we do have some representation at that conference.
Thank you. And any councillors wish to speak against? Councillor any councillors wish to make comment? I think Councillor Maxwell.
Just Mr Mayor, that if it's a face-to-face conference, I would like to attend. And I'll most probably take my own way down and turn the wheels on the caravan.
Thank you. And councillors, if it is a face-to-face opportunity, which is possibly somewhat unlikely, but I also would wish to attend. But so, are there any further comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against, the motion is carried. Item 9.4. Councillor Inglis and seconded Councillor Webb. Thank you. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to your
No,
motion?
thanks, Mr Mayor.
Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? Very exciting report, councillors. I thought we'd have some discussion. If we have none, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against, the motion is carried. Item 9.5. Move Councillor Wilson and second Councillor Impey. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to your motion? Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Webb.
Just one, Mr Mayor, it's a bit scary, the amount of, we're lucky enough as a council to have reasonable sums of money in our investments, but like everybody else, we're not getting much of a return, and it's highlighted quite well in this report, the minimal return that we are actually getting, but it's still great to have that money in the bank.
Thank you. Any further discussion on that one, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 9.6. Move Councillor Betts and Councillor Tickle. Councillor Betts, do you wish to speak to your motion? Any councillors wish to speak against? Any councillors wish to make comment?
No.
Councillor Tickle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it's great that those amendments have been made to reflect the modern age, which perhaps it's taken COVID to do it, that we can actually video conference and not have to be in the room to vote, which means that people, when they're travelling or with their work or otherwise, can still attend a meeting, but attend in a modern way. But it's just quite extraordinary that it's taken a COVID crisis to bring all these things to the fore, not only in local government but in business, and everyone's getting used to doing things online a lot more and by video conferencing. So it's great to see, and particularly also with moving into the future, we're hoping that we'd be encouraging people onto council that are in the workforce and are younger people, and work often takes people away, or this could be out of town, not too far away and can't get home in time. They can attend a meeting, and that's how it should be. If you're overseas, when we're lucky enough to be able to travel again, you can attend a meeting. So I'm glad that we've been able to make those changes to reflect modern times.
Thank you. Any further comment, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. Item 9.7. Move Councillor Inglis and Councillor Impey, thank you. Councillor Inglis, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor, the policy register is exciting, but this is even more exciting than the policy register, I reckon, this one. It's clear, Mr Mayor, that, I had many targets, but it's amazing, isn't it, how many of the programs and targets are impacted by COVID. When you sort of read that, it just reminds you that it touches many parts of our organisation. The volunteers, page 842, I kid you not, Mr Mayor. The volunteers program, isn't that going well? 35 active organisations, but what I was particularly interested in, 57% of all the expressions of interest to join are people under the age of 30 years. Isn't that nice? Because that's a huge problem with our volunteer base at ageing, and I just haven't, that's terrific. The TRC Youth Council, 19 new people, 15 to 18. Mr Mayor, 78%'s girls. How good's that? Female representation in local government, and hopefully these people will be future civic leaders and become councillors, because local government in New South Wales, female representation's barely, I think it's about 27%. So terrific, 78% girls. Mr Mayor, page 912, I know one you're interested in, the DAs. It's interesting with COVID, it's almost, we've got the quarterly reports here, so I just quickly banged them into 2 6-monthly lots. And it's almost a pre-COVID sort of, just to see how they're going in relation to COVID, no COVID. And it's interesting, DAs lodged 290 for the 2 quarters pre-COVID, 231 with COVID, 20% reduction. Guess you can form your own view about that. And it's pretty similar with DAs determined at 22%. Estimated value, you've got to be careful with that, but that's down about 27%. So COVID, pre-COVID. So some interesting. But most alarming, Mr Mayor, in the entire report for me was page 918. So I need to look at my colleagues here. Average councillor attendance, 8.6. I want to know where the 0.4 is, Mr Mayor. Average councillor attendance, 8.6. What happened to the 0.4? Mr Impey, any ideas?
Thank you, councillor Inglis. Any further comment, councillor Impey?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just a quick one, just with those volunteer numbers, just acknowledge the work, the great work of the RU volunteering staff and team and the initiative itself. It just feels like yesterday we were at the launch of that. And you know, speed time is roughly a year down the path and we wouldn't have been able to have a launch. So it's just really good to see initiatives like that, which also was made available in part through, in terms of where they're based, through the gift of the state government of the old lands building. So I guess we need to acknowledge that all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle came together. And I think that's in essence one of the reasons why we're seeing an increase in volunteers, but also an increase in younger volunteers, because we have the mechanism in place.
Thank you. Any further comment, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The motion is carried. And before I call for a motion to move into closed council to consider items 11.1 through 11.8, I'd like to make an offer to any members of the public, if they'd like any matters listed for closed council brought into open council, or any members of the council. If not, I would like to invite those members of the public to vacate the chamber and thank them for their interest and attention. Thank you.